Human rights in the Middle East have been causing problems all around the world. Many human rights people have the right to have are restricted by the governments all around the Middle East. Freedom of speech, which means having the right to communicate, is censored. Limitations are provided while regarding human rights with the purpose of protecting of political reasons. The freedom of religion states that all citizens have the right to believe and practice the religion they choose. In the Middle East, the majority of the citizens follow Islam. Unfortunately, many times people have been harmed or abused when discovered that they worship another. The ACHR, which stands for Arab Commission for Human Rights, is an NGO working to achieve the human rights in the Middle East. Another one is CDHRAP, meaning Committee for the Defense of Human Rights in the Arabian Peninsula. The United Nations wrote in 1948 the Universal Declaration of Human Rights with the purpose of lowering the conflicts that were happening between countries. This declaration establishes all the human rights people all around the world are entitled to. Even though many countries don't follow it, the UN is still trying to promote the human rights around. This conflict can be defined as a governmental conflict. The government often censors the human rights with the purpose of protecting politics. For example, freedom of speech and freedom of media are the human rights which the government cares about most, since those are the ones that can affect the image and reputation of the politicians and the authorities. This conflict can also be classified as ideological, because since there are people who believe that they have the right for human rights, there are also people who believe that the rights should be controlled by authorities and governments. Human rights in Saudi Arabia are based on the Islamic law called Sharia and the absolute rule of the royal family. The purpose of their human rights is to get rid of the extremist groups spreading Islam and instead promote the values of the real Islamic religion, which are moderation and tolerance. In United Arab Emirates, citizens don't have the right to choose or vote for their government. Elections aren't available and they can neither form political parties. The right to freedom of speech and freedom of press is prohibited since the government doesn't permit it, so they can talk bad about them. In Syria, there are very few human rights permitted by the state, and often people suffer because of it. Freedom of expression is censored by the authorities, in this case, the state. This situation has been classified by far one of the poorest and worst in the world. Women face discrimination day by day, and freedom of speech is also prohibited by the state.
Migration in the Middle East has always been a very important topic, since it has a history of immigrations. The first culture to establish here was Mesopotamia, and they established near the rivers where they could move easily away. Middle East has always been a very conflicted zone, causing big armed conflicts, which caused people to flee away from their homeland. Nowadays, there's a really big conflict going on in Iraq and Syria. This has caused nearly 11 million people to flee away from their homeland to other countries in the past 4 years. This will cause an economic crisis in years, not only in the countries that people are arriving, but also in their homeland, where they will have no working class, since the people that are migrating are mostly small children, women, and men from between 20 and 40. The United Nations is really involved in the conflict, and they have made refugee camps outside the conflict areas. And also they are helping countries that are receiving refugees from the Middle East countries and are encouraging other countries to do the same. Syria has an immigration crisis due to an armed conflict between ISIS and the rest of the world. This armed conflict has caused a lot of cities to be bombed and a lot of religious people being chased by the extremist group. In Israel, the problem is vice versa. A lot of people come into the country with different culture, and every group was a country. Israel is one of the most cultural countries in the Middle East due to the great amount of immigrants. After World War II, Jewish people came from escaping from Hitler and the Nazi army, and that caused Palestinian people to be really angry because they took away their territory. It is the most diverse cultural country in the Middle East. In fact, the greatest portion of their population is not even from the United Arab Emirates. Many foreign people come to the UAE looking for a job opportunity in the cities such as Dubai or Abu Dhabi, which are known to be the capital of money. This has caused a cultural shock since the country is declared as an Islamic state, but due to a big portion of different cultures, it is permitted for people to practice their religion. This has caused many problems in the streets.
Throughout all the Middle East, the acts of terrorism are starting to become more constant than ever, and sadly, some of the Middle East countries are known or discriminated because of all the terrorist attacks they have made in their countries and in the other countries. Nowadays, a lot of people from the Middle East are migrating into Europe countries because of all the ISIS attacks going on in their home. A big part of Europe is living a crisis, so the migration of the Islams may affect even more their countries. Nowadays, Europe is making plans of controlling the migration process so that instead of decreasing its economy, it increases in a positive way. ISIS made a recent attack into Paris which caused a lot of breakout in the population, making Paris people discriminate even more the migrators from the Middle East. The US and other countries also got involved in the conflict to try to help Paris, and Paris and the US have attacked several times ISIS camps, and ISIS has threatened the US and other countries that we will be coming upcoming terrorist attacks soon. There's a big problem of terrorism in Syria nowadays. Syria is located in the Middle East. The main group involved in this problem is a rebel group named ISIS. This terrorist group started around April of 2013, and it also has under attack Iraq, not only Syria. What ISIS is doing with the population is convincing them to be a religious extremists, making them make valuable sacrifices that will somehow make them resurrect, and they are brainwashing a lot of people of all ages, even young age children. The situation in Syria is getting a lot more intense nowadays. The intensity of the terrorist attacks has been so intense that Europe neighbor countries have received a very big amount of Syrian people because they're escaping. Some of them arrive in little boats and others have arrived swimming. Recent cases have showed also babies that died in the journey in the ocean, and they get washed away on the shore of the European beaches. Some of the other actors that are taken in consideration in this conflict are the countries like Russia, Germany, and the US. Germany had opened doors for all Syrian immigrants, but unfortunately got to a point of overlap of people, so they stopped letting all of the people in and started to control more the immigration of Syrian people. On the other hand, Russia and the US have sent military airstrikes to all of the terrorist bases, according to BBC News. This problem just started as a local problem, and now it's become an almost worldwide situation. Some of the reasons of this could be simply because of the fear the other countries will have to future terrorist attacks. Also, countries' economies could get affected because of the stop of trading between those countries. Also, the interaction between Islam people and other religion people could get more intense because of the stereotyping the other people are getting from the Islams. In Iraq, the last big conflict was with the United States. Since the conflict in New York City with the Twin Towers, the terrorists that took control over the airplanes that were crashed were Iraqi terrorists sent by Osama bin Laden. The American army started looking all over the world for him until they confirmed to find him and kill him during a secret operation. After this, the US continued to make small attacks into Iraq. They kept doing this, and before doing it, the US still warned them about the future attacks, and Iraq government still told the government to launch their attacks. Thanks to globalization, a lot of actions that the US didn't came out into news, but also besides the conflict between army and terrorists, a lot of innocent people got hurt in the process because of a lot of US army established themselves into Iraq for a quite long time. With the US settled there, the US started to get consciousness of their acts and against the civilians and started to help instead. Yemen is one of the Middle East countries that is also affected by the attacks of the ISIS terrorists. Yemen, that's located under Saudi Arabia, has suffered a recent attack by ISIS, the group that also attacked Paris last week. ISIS dropped a bomb in Yemen capital and killed around 29 people and leaving hundreds of more injured. After the attack, ISIS still warned the people of Yemen that they will continue to make surprise attacks. This attack was around the month of September. Luckily, they haven't reported another attack since. The attack they made was with a bomb, and they dropped it in the capital of Yemen.
Gender equality refers to the state in which access to rights and/or opportunities is not affected by gender. Gender equality in the Middle East used to be practically non-existent. Women in the Middle East used to have no rights. They were treated as property. In various countries, a woman would be sold, would be forced to marry someone, etc. Also, in this inequality, females are not allowed to go outside their households without a male companion and without a burqa, piece of clothing used by a woman to cover themselves from head to toes. Recently, gender equality situation has improved in many regions around the Middle East, in some places more than others, but it is a step forward into the elimination of gender inequality. This situation is currently taking place in the Middle East, focusing in three different countries. These three countries being Israel, Syria, and Lebanon. There is a huge responsibility lying on the community of these three countries. The people in these countries can make a huge impact, for better or worse, because they are the ones who are applying and reinforcing inequality around their community. The government also participates in this issue because there are applications and situations of inequality happening in which the government takes place or even contributes into the violation of a person's human rights. The majority of the violations that are applied and ignored by the government are against women. The United Nations is doing everything in their power to eradicate gender inequality. The UN main for the UN main focus regarding gender inequality is directed towards the Middle East and the northern part of Africa. One of the United Nations main goals, number 10, is dedicated with the sole purpose of ending the inequality among and within nations. These conflicts occurring in places and regions of the Middle East is a combination of religious and ideological conflicts as well as ethnic. It is a combination of the three types of conflict which makes up the core of the problem. This makes up the core of the problem because there is a different variations of the same religion, ideologies, and ethnicities, which make a different types of inequality between gender. There was a plan that was taking place in the Middle East where the UN started empowering to help the gender inequality problems around the Middle East. The UN has been using these seven independent priorities: strengthen opportunities for post-primary education for girls while simultaneously meeting commitments to universal primary education, guarantee sexual and reproductive health and rights, invest in infrastructure to reduce women's and girls' time burdens, guarantee women's and girls' property and enhance rights. Eliminate gender inequality in employment by decreasing women's reliance on informal employment, closing gender gaps in earnings, and reducing occupational segregation. Increase women's share and seats of the national parliaments and local government bodies. Combat violence against girls and women. Gender inequality in Israel increased over the past year, but the country remains the best in the region when it comes to equality between sexes, according to a World Economic Forum of 2014 Gender Gap Report. Israel's overall equality ranking with a score of 0.700, where 0 reflects inequality and 1 reflects complete equality among genders. The UN aims to achieve the best possible points by the end of 2015. Their aim was to score to get to 8 to 0.850. Had al-Nusra and the ISIS have implemented their own variation of the Sharia law, which is a law based on religion of Islam. This has placed discriminatory regulations particularly on women, violating Syrian laws and generally promote gender inequality. The current rule of the extremist groups is essentially what has ripped away women's rights to dress, move, and practice the religion of their choice. Lebanon is the world's eighth worst country in terms of gender equality and ranks second worst for women's participation in politics, according to the recent report by the World Economic Forum. Lebanon ranked 135 out of 142 surveyed countries. Since in 2010, Lebanon's ranking has sunk from 116 to 135.
Education in the Middle East is one of the biggest situations they actually suffer from. Among many other, many factors are the reason why countries in the Middle East lack of a good system of education or access to education for children. These factors, which include religious, political, or cultural problems, are the main cause for this situation. The situation currently were happening are in countries such as Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Yemen, countries with a very low rate of education due to many factors. In these countries, education is a matter to worry about. Its education percentages really show a poor demonstration of a weak education system. In the political area, corruption among the government or lacking of a good economy are reasons of a bad education system in its country. This drives into having a bad quality of services of education such as schools, teachers, materials. In general, because of their corruption or bad economy, the lack of a good system. In the cultural area, religion is the best problem organizations and government face to improve and implement education. The reason is that society in the Middle East have a very strong beliefs for their Muslim religion, which their ideology of thinking almost prohibits education for almost 50% of population. This 50% of population comes majorly from women. The strong belief they sustain creates an obstacle for women to get to receive education. Wars. Wars have been going in Middle East countries for many past years. This region has always been a very problematic zone in which at least a country is in war. War against another country, as well as revolutions or territorial war between government and terrorist groups are a big problem which has created a barrier for a good education system. Literally, urban zones have been destroyed by the battles and wars that keep going on. For those reasons, many schools have closed due to security. Imagine the insecurity that must be going on for schools to close, and not just one school, but many schools. This makes children not learn in their prime years of education, which creates an uneducated society. Currently, the UN holds action in those specific places which release in need of international help. Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Yemen. UNICEF not long ago released a statement declaring that around 30 million of children are kept out of school due to conflict suffering in those regions. That's a very big amount. Through UNICEF, which focuses on children, they are working harshly on the goal of achieving universal primary education.